These are the scariest moments in K-pop Demon Hunters, but first, we'll be looking at one of the most terrifying demon plane attack. The movie doesn't ease into the supernatural elements. It opens mid-flight with what seems like a routine trip, then immediately turns an airplane into a death trap when the pilots reveal demonic traits and start going crazy.
Oh, look, patterns.
Oh, these? These are just...
The claustrophobia makes everything worse. You're trapped at 30,000 feet with nowhere to run, and the narrow aisles become improvised battlegrounds where every movement could send you tumbling into the galley or overhead bins. The demon's inhuman movements combined with the hero's blade work creates this intense, chaotic fight scene where sparks are flying and people are getting thrown around. Even though the blood is minimal and the demon eventually disintegrates into dust, the sheer velocity and violence of the encounter sets the tone that this movie is going to put these characters in genuine danger. But airplane fights are just the warm-up for sustained weapon-based combat. Weapon-heavy fights. The choreography might look like a music video, but watching people swing sharp metal at each other for minutes at a time gets genuinely intense. Throughout the first act, the group handles what they call routine hunts, but routine for Demon Hunters means synchronized sword combat with creatures that move faster than humans and hit harder than anything natural. The fights feature swords, knives, and short blades prominently, with the trio using coordinated attacks, flips, and defensive maneuvers that require split-second timing to avoid getting sliced apart by demonic claws. Even with the comic beats and pop music aesthetics, the sheer velocity of sharp weapons moving through space creates sustained tension. You're watching people who could die if they mistime a block or stumble during a combo attack. The relentless pace means there's no time to breathe during these sequences. It's constant motion, constant danger, constant split-second decisions that determine whether someone lives or gets torn apart. The movie maintains its bloodless approach, but your brain fills in the gaps about what would happen if those weapons connected with human flesh instead of demonic energy. Speaking of demonic energy, the way demons die is surprisingly disturbing. Demons disintegrating. Watching humanoid figures crumble into dust creates this deeply unsettling visual that haunts you. The movie establishes a visual rule where defeated demons don't bleed out like humans, instead they collapse into dust. For younger viewers especially, seeing figures that were walking and talking moments before suddenly crumble into ash reinforces that these monsters were actively moving among civilians, potentially for years. The dust particles floating in light beams create this haunting reminder that someone or something just ceased to exist, and all that's left are floating specks that will eventually settle and disappear completely. But at least demon deaths are quick, unlike the psychological torture their leader inflicts. GWIMA's psychological abuse. This demon leader doesn't just kill subordinates, he breaks them psychologically first, and watching that power dynamic play out is genuinely chilling. The movie cuts away from the heroes to show the demon hierarchy, establishing GYMA as both mastermind and abuser who maintains control through fear, humiliation, and unpredictable violence. He belittles his underlings by calling them weak and incompetent, then follows up those verbal attacks with brutal punishment.
I understand. You are weak!
In one early scene, he executes a subordinate on the spot just to set an example for others. The violence is chilling because it's calculated rather than heat of the moment. He maintains absolute authority through zero tolerance for failure, which creates this atmosphere where everyone around him lives in constant terror. The power dynamic telegraphs that betrayal, mistakes, or even bad luck will result in immediate death. Every time minor demons reappear on screen, you know they're operating under threat of execution, but individual psychological abuse is nothing compared to mass mind control. Crowd hypnosis. The movie takes one of the safest, happiest places imaginable and turns it into a supernatural trap where being in a crowd becomes a vulnerability. During what appears to be a normal, flashy concert performance, a glamour-like spell ripples through the audience and even affects some of the protagonists. The horror comes from watching the safety of numbers get flipped into mass vulnerability. Instead of being protected by the crowd, everyone becomes part of a collective weapon that can be aimed at the heroes. The protagonists have to fight their way through the situation without harming entranced civilians, which adds moral pressure on top of the immediate physical danger. Every move they make could hurt innocent people. The trance effect spreads through the venue like a wave, and you can see individual audience members losing their autonomy one by one as the spell takes hold of their minds and bodies. The most disturbing aspect is how the euphoria on people's faces doesn't change even as they're being used as weapons. They look happy and peaceful while participating in something that could kill them. But at least concert mind control happens in an obvious supernatural setting, unlike infiltration that happens in plain sight. Idol Awards Imposter. When you can't trust familiar faces in a high-pressure public environment, paranoia becomes a survival skill rather than a mental health problem. The movie relocates the supernatural threat to a glittering, high-stakes awards ceremony where reputations are made and destroyed in front of millions of viewers watching live broadcasts. Demons impersonate familiar people by exploiting backstage chaos, wardrobe changes, and security gaps to maneuver Rumi toward a trap that relies on her trusting faces she recognizes.
Have been since the day you were born.
Under the hot lights and camera scrutiny, every smile could hide fangs, every friendly gesture could be manipulation, and every familiar voice could belong to something that wants to kill her. The fear becomes social and psychological rather than physical. The threat isn't just death, but public humiliation, being gaslit in front of cameras, and losing control of your narrative while millions of people watch. The imposter plot creates this atmosphere where basic social interactions become potential threats. How do you function normally when anyone could be replaced by something hostile? The high-stakes public environment means that any mistake or moment of confusion gets amplified and broadcast to massive audiences who will judge and analyze every reaction. Speaking of public humiliation, the next scene takes personal exposure to devastating levels. Rumi's demon marks. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't monsters trying to kill you, but having your deepest secrets revealed without your consent in front of massive audiences. Rumi's body bears marks connected to demon lore, a secret she guards carefully because of what they imply about her identity, her past, and whether she belongs with normal people. During the confusion of a performance or award ceremony, her marks get revealed under harsh lighting and camera zooms. Gasps ripple through the audience, phones come out to record, and narratives start spinning without her input or control. The horror here is involuntary outing and losing narrative control over your own body and story. She has to deal with public scrutiny and judgment while also fighting for her life, creating this impossible situation where both survival and reputation are under attack simultaneously. But public humiliation is nothing compared to personal betrayal from people you trust most. Confrontation with Jinu's deception. The emotional stakes cut deeper than any blade when you discover that someone you trusted has been lying to you about fundamental aspects of your life and identity. Jinu serves as a mentor figure with deep knowledge of demon lore, but he's been withholding or distorting crucial information for protection, creating fault lines in the found family structure. Rumi discovers contradictions and half-truths about her marks, the real nature of the enemy, and Jinu's past choices. The revelation leads to a heated confrontation with accusations, raised voices, and a complete rupture of trust. The scene reframes earlier events and revelations, making you question everything you thought you understood about the characters' relationships and motivations. The emotional violence feels more devastating than physical attacks because it destroys the safe harbor that Rumi relied on for stability and guidance during supernatural chaos. Speaking of everything falling apart, the found family is about to completely implode. Breakup of the trio. When your chosen family abandons you right before the biggest fight of your life, it's scarier than any monster because it attacks your core emotional foundation. After mounting pressures from public crises, revealed secrets, and moral disagreements, the group's trust finally breaks at exactly the wrong time. Mira and Zoe confront Rumi over perceived betrayals and reckless choices that endangered both the team and their public image. The argument escalates from tense whispers backstage to a painful final split.
Do you have patterns? These are supposed to be gone.
Found family serves as the hero's emotional armor throughout the supernatural threats, so watching it shatter leaves everyone more vulnerable than they've ever been. The fear isn't monsters or death, it's abandonment and isolation before facing the most dangerous challenges they've encountered. When you lose your support system, every threat becomes exponentially more terrifying. The breakup happens through cruel words and accusations that can't be taken back, creating wounds that might never heal, even if they survive the supernatural conflicts. But at least broken friendships are straightforward compared to enemies that manipulate your moral compass. Nice demons, mall sequence. The movie erodes your sense of safety in ordinary places by introducing threats that look harmless until it's too late to escape. What appears to be a light, fan-facing appearance at a shopping mall becomes a moral trap that blurs the lines between who deserves protection and who represents a genuine threat. Playful, approachable demons mingle among civilians, acting friendly and harmless while gradually revealing their true intentions. When their behavior flips to hostile, panic spreads through a crowded retail space with limited exits. The bait and switch destroys your ability to assess threats based on appearance or behavior. If cute, friendly beings can suddenly become lethal, how do you identify danger before it's too late? The heroes must act carefully to avoid harming civilians who might be influenced or controlled, rather than genuinely hostile, adding moral complexity to what should be straightforward combat. The crowded environment means that every action has potential consequences for innocent bystanders who don't understand what's happening or how to protect themselves. The scene takes place in an environment that should feel completely safe and familiar, making the supernatural intrusion feel more violating and unpredictable. Speaking of unpredictable, the next villains weaponize the aesthetics of cuteness itself. Saja Boy's heart projectile powers. When adorable visual effects become actual weapons, it creates this disturbing cognitive dissonance that makes you question everything you see. The Saja boys exploit pop aesthetics as camouflage, using stage effects and cute imagery to disguise directed attacks that cause real physical harm to their targets. During performances, what look like dazzling visuals, glowing hearts, glittering beams, sparkles, and light shows are revealed as projectile weapons. Victims stagger or collapse while crowds cheer, completely unaware that real violence is happening. The collision of cute visuals with genuine physical threat creates uncanny dissonance that's especially unsettling for viewers who associate those aesthetic elements with safety and joy. The audience becomes complicit in the violence by applauding what they think are impressive special effects, while people are actually being attacked right in front of them. The weaponization of cute imagery perverts symbols of love and happiness, turning them into tools of harm and deception that exploit people's positive associations. This makes it impossible to trust your initial reactions to visual stimuli because what appears harmless or even delightful could actually be designed to hurt you. But individual attacks using cute weapons are nothing compared to mass manipulation on a citywide scale. Citywide Soul Harvesting Concert. The villains scale up from local threats to a mass event that uses an entire city's population as unwitting participants in their own destruction. A mega concert serves as cover for a massive ritual where choreography functions like magical sigils, lyrics and rhythms sustain supernatural spells, and the entranced audience becomes a conduit for catastrophic magic. The heroes have to fight their way through a sea of glamour-struck civilians who have no idea they're participating in a city-level threat disguised as entertainment. The scope of the threat means that failure doesn't just mean death for the protagonists, but potential destruction or corruption for hundreds of thousands of innocent people. The ritual hides in plain sight as a celebration, meaning the catastrophe is happening while people applaud and cheer, completely unaware that they're contributing to their own doom. The moral stakes spike because stopping the ritual requires disrupting or potentially harming innocents who are under supernatural compulsion rather than making conscious choices. The sheer scale of potential destruction creates this overwhelming sense of responsibility, where the hero's actions determine whether an entire city survives or falls to demonic influence. Speaking of overwhelming responsibility, the next scene shows the ultimate price of trying to save everyone. Near sacrifice and death, Jinu. Watching someone you care about disintegrate in your arms while saving your life is the kind of trauma that changes you permanently.
You gave me my soul back.
With the spell reaching its peak and the team fractured by earlier conflicts, Jinu steps in as a mentor figure to prevent the ritual from completing and consuming everything. He transfers what remains of his restored soul to protect Rumi and interrupt the catastrophic magic. But the process causes his body to disintegrate into dust in her arms or immediate vicinity. The on-screen dissolution feels final and intimate in a way that hits much harder than anonymous deaths. This isn't a faceless enemy, it's someone who cared about the protagonist and chose to sacrifice himself for their survival. The mix of grief and urgency creates emotional overload where characters have to process devastating loss while still fighting for survival in an active crisis situation. The visual of someone literally crumbling away while trying to comfort them creates this helpless, desperate feeling where love and loss become physically tangible. The sacrifice resolves immediate threats, but leaves lasting psychological damage that affects how characters approach future relationships and conflicts. But individual sacrifice is just preparation for the reality-breaking finale. Villain defeat and resealing. The final showdown pushes sensory limits with sound, light, and supernatural effects layered at maximum intensity while emphasizing how close everything came to total collapse. The climactic battle with Guaima combines everything established throughout the movie, music as weapon, choreography as magical sigils, and the enormous personal cost of wielding supernatural power. Large-scale supernatural combat collides with stagecraft through blinding lights, reality-warping visuals, and shockwaves that affect both the immediate area and the surrounding city. The resealing process requires precise timing under extreme pressure while dealing with collateral damage and masses of stunned civilians who are just regaining awareness of their surroundings. The spectacle operates at maximum volume across all sensory channels, creating an overwhelming experience that pushes the limits of what viewers can process comfortably. The scope of destruction and near-miss catastrophe emphasizes how close the world came to breaking entirely, making the victory feel precarious rather than triumphant. The aftermath shows lasting consequences and damage that can't be easily repaired, suggesting that some scars from this conflict will be permanent. But even reality-breaking combat is less disturbing than psychological scenes that hit too close to real-world issues. Themes of self-harm ideation avoided. After repeated betrayals and public exposure, the movie briefly touches on genuinely dark psychological territory before pulling back to affirm life and community. Rumi reaches a hopeless low point where she interprets herself as a danger to everyone around her and asks Celine to end her life to stop the threat she believes she poses.
Before I destroy what I swore to protect.
Celine refuses the request unequivocally and works to anchor Rumi back to purpose and community, but the moment itself can be distressing, even though the scene ultimately rejects self-harm. The conversation feels emotionally raw and realistic in a way that stands out from the supernatural elements, making it hit harder than fantastical threats. The scene demonstrates how psychological pressure and social isolation can lead to dangerous thinking patterns that feel logical from inside but are actually distorted by trauma. The resolution emphasizes connection, purpose, and hope as alternatives to despair, but the initial request creates genuine tension about whether the character will choose survival. The moment requires careful handling for younger or sensitive viewers because it addresses real-world mental health struggles rather than fictional supernatural threats. Speaking of overwhelming intensity, the finale throws everything at maximum volume. High-intensity finale with mind control break. The climactic liberation sequence creates cathartic chaos that can be overwhelming even though it represents victory and freedom from supernatural influence. The hero's final strategy uses the same cultural tools that created the mass trance song, rhythm, and performance, but redirects them toward liberation rather than control. Rumi's countersong fractures the massive glamour effect, sending a wave of awakening that ripples through the entire audience as people regain their agency and awareness. The release creates rapid cuts between individual faces regaining consciousness, surges of sound as the spell breaks, and strobing effects as magical energy dissipates across the venue. Confusion transforms into stampede risk as thousands of people suddenly regain awareness amid debris, ongoing supernatural effects, and the chaos of a partially collapsed ritual. The sensory overload from quick cuts, volume surges, and crowd panic can be overwhelming even though the underlying situation is resolving positively. The finale demonstrates that even liberation and victory can be chaotic and disorienting when they happen at this scale and intensity. If you enjoyed this video, you need to see the best vs worst K-pop Demon Hunter characters.